Hare Gange Mahadev Sri Shankara Parvati Pati Mahadev Sri Shankara.
Namaste, it's Sahara Rose, and welcome back to the Highest Self podcast, a place where we discuss what makes you your soul's highest evolvement. I am loving getting into these conversations where we just explore different topics. To me, that is the most fun, to really let intuition guide us and whatever is meant to come through. And this is definitely one of those conversations. So as you know, I am the founder of Rose Gold Goddesses, the sacred sisterhood collective all about embodying the goddess within. And what we do in Rose Gold Goddesses is every single month we work with a new goddess archetype. So what are the goddess archetypes? First of all, well, the goddesses to me are a depiction of an archetype or an aspect of the divine feminine. So they're not these like living people who then died. Rather, they are personifications of an aspect of ourselves. So for example, Durga energy would be the representation of our courage and our strength and our fierce divine feminine wisdom. And then someone like Lakshmi would be the embodiment of our fertility and our abundance and our prosperity. And Saraswati would be the embodiment of our creativity and our knowledge and our music. And these goddesses are not unique to Vedic culture as well. They actually come from all around the world. So in Rose Gold Goddesses, we've dove in so deep into so many, from goddess Isis and Sekhmet, the Egyptian goddesses, the ancient Kemetic Nubian goddesses as well. We've looked at goddess Kuan Yin of compassion. We've looked at some Celtic and pagan goddesses such as Ceridwen, who we just did this past month, and Brigid, who we did in May. We've looked at Orishas, which are the Yoruba tradition of Africa. So looking at Yemaya, we'll definitely be working with Oshun. So looking at how similar, I really see the similarities of the goddess archetypes all around the world, that everywhere, regardless of culture, religion, background, exposure to other cultures, we had the same downloads that the feminine is fierce as she is sensual. She is a mother and she is a lover. She is all. And right now, so many of us are awakening to that. I have seen such, an awakening towards wanting to learn more about Mary Magdalene and revisit maybe those stories that we have been told. And, we got really into this in the conversation with Ben Decker on miracles versus magic, and people wanting to experience the divine as them, seeing themselves as a reflection of the divine. I don't see it as separate from us. I don't see it as a statue outside of us. I don't see it as this thing that we have to be fearful of, and if we don't pray to it enough, it's going to get mad at us and ruin our lives. I don't see it as so unforgiving like that. I think that that's what man has created in their idea of God, of this thing outside of you that if you don't do XYZ thing, it's going to be mad at you and punish you. And that's not what the divine feminine is. Above all of that, she's nature. She is the earth, she is the water, she is the stars, she is the fire, she is the earth, she is all of it. When we look at the doshas are a reflection of the elements. Vata dosha is air and space. Pitta is fire and water. Kapha is earth and water. And then we could also see, for example, in Chinese medicine, they work with the different elements. They actually have wood and metal instead. So we can also see in shamanic traditions, we have the salute to the 6 directions, and they each represent different elements. So what we can see is that this is universal. So I love learning about goddess wisdom, ancient wisdom, old mysteries, and I really believe that so many of us, including myself, are here to bring them back to life. And I also love to learn from people who have really dedicated their lives to a particular lineage. So on this episode, Isis Indriya has very much dedicated her life to the Egyptian Kemetic lineage. And when I say Kemet, what that actually is what Egypt used to be called before this name Egypt was given to it. So it's the ancient name for it, and Nubian is southern, modern day southern Egypt is Nubian. So in this episode, I sit down for just a deep dive conversation with Isis to talk all about ancient Egyptian mysteries, from goddess Isis and the different stories to working with their magic and symbols, and If you are someone who really resonates with the Ankh, for example, I'm sure you've seen an Ankh symbol. It's one of the most common symbols universally, but essentially it looks like a cross, but the top of this cross is a circle. And the reason why is because it's the merging of the feminine and the masculine. So the circle represents the womb, the ovary, and the straight line represents the lingam, or the penis. So it's the merging of the two, and it comes from the story of goddess Isis and Osiris and how they merged together as one. So if you are someone that has always resonated with ancient Egypt, maybe when you were in school and you learned about ancient Egypt, you've always loved hieroglyphics and pharaohs and pyramids and Cleopatra and all of these different things. Well, I believe all of us have had a past life in Egypt. Many people, including Doreen Virtue, has done so much research on past lives, says we've all had a past life in Egypt, at least one. So some of us are really going through a period of our dharmas to, I always see it as almost like past lives have different stages that we really get to like dive into them. So you might be going through a period where your work is really all about Egypt, and then you might go through one that it's all about Peru, and one that's all about India, and one that's all about Bali, and one that's all about wherever else. Just naming these because I've gone through those, and they're very, very common ones because they were all, some of the most incredible ancient civilizations. So Egypt is a major, major, major one, and I love speaking with Isis because she has really spent years and years and years of research into this and knows so much and is such an intellectual on this topic. And I love having people like this on the podcast because we can really dive into a subject and learn more about it. So without further ado, let's welcome Isis to the Highest Self podcast. And before we get started, I have an announcement for you. Are you ready to discover your dharma, your soul's purpose, the big reason why you are here? Well, if so, then I invite you to pre-order my new book, Discover Your Dharma, a Vedic guide to discovering your purpose. This book has my true story for the very first time of how I began and created this lifestyle where I am being able to be me full time, and the many obstacles and roadblocks I overcame with my family members, with limiting beliefs, doubts, fears, and how I overcame them to really be able to share my gifts with this planet unapologetically. This book has everything you need to know for discovering and also embodying your dharma, how to take action on it, how to find yourself in the 9 dharma archetypes, and then create a dharma blueprint for yourself to put your dharma into action. I share about everything from what to do if you're confused, if you have a lot of different things you like to do, to what if you aren't sure how to take action, and everything in between. I also have incredible bonuses, including meditations, courses, and gifts available for you when you pre-order the book and submit your receipt at iamsahararose.com/dharma. So if you're interested in diving into the book and learning more, check it out. The link is in the bio, and I also have my Dharma archetype quiz that is now available that will help you understand which of the 9 Dharma archetypes you are so you can get started in understanding yours. I email you tons of great information from the book so you can begin on your Dharma journey as soon as possible. So head over to iamsahararose.com/dharma. The link is in the show notes, and I'm so excited to share this book with you. Welcome, Isis, to the Highest Self podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
And I know you'd like to start us off with an honoring of the ancestors who, created and lived on this land. So if you can start us off.
Yeah, thank you, Sahara. I just want to greet these ancestral homelands that I'm currently inhabiting. These are ancestral homeland Nisenan people. I love to say Shelley Covert and Ginger Covert's name. This is in currently called Nevada County, but is Ulicha. This area is called Ulicha in the Nisenan language. And then I just want to greet the ancestral homelands where you are, and also in that way acknowledge our benevolent ancestors, guides, and allies. Mine are the Tatomonas and Chamorro, native to the island of Guam, and everyone here that's gathered to just want to acknowledge all of our benevolent ancestors, guides, and allies that have dreamt us into this alignment today. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And the first question I'd love to ask you is, what makes you your highest self?
That's a really great question. I've never heard that before. For me, life is a chemical journey. I feel like all day, every day, I'm learning and growing and evolving and alchemically transforming. And part of what I've studied over the years and what I'm committed to is the magnum opus, which is the divine work, where everything I'm doing is an interior transformational process that's similar to an exterior transformational process. So what makes me my highest self is the commitment to continue to do the inner work that reflects in the world around me too. So every day, it's an everyday, all day thing, and it's a commitment. It never turns off. I'm never not doing the inner divine work, and everything I am doing, that level of commitment, intention, and practice. Even when I like to use this example, even when I'm washing the dishes, it's an alchemical process of washing and tending to anything inside my own consciousness that needs that love and care so that I can be available and show up in a good way in the world.
And this word right now, alchemy, it's almost like a buzzword right now. People are really using it a lot. So can you describe what alchemy really means?
I can share a little bit of what I've been taught. I studied alchemy for many years. I used to teach alchemy too, but my main teacher, William J. Kiesel, I just want to say his name. He's an amazing alchemy guide and teacher. What I learned is alchemy is the divine, the magnum opus, the divine work, the transformational, transmutational process that in everything, all day, all the time. And alchemizing is seeing the self reflected in the work that we're doing. And oftentimes it would be associated particularly with lab work, when we would witness the transformation of different plant material in a specific alignment of the cosmological alignment through the glassware or copper lab material, and witnessing the transformation that happens there. Also, the transformational process that happens on the inside, and the distilled essence of what is manifested is connected to that journey that one takes. My relation with alchemy is an interior, internal, continual commitment, like I said, around the higher self work to the transformational process on behalf of not only my own liberation, but the liberation of others, because we're all very interdependent and woven. So the good work we do on the inside is supportive and a rippling effect, and reflects the good work that can happen in every way, shape, and form because of our web relations. So I really believe in the rippling effect of my own work on myself, and taking care of and tending to these parts of myself, the rippling effect that it makes in all of my relations.
So beautifully said. And I think we're witnessing that firsthand right now with all of the chaos happening in the world around us, that it's so easy to let go of our own practices, our own spiritual growth, self-care, et cetera, because we feel like we need to tend to everything outside of us. And I was actually thinking today about, for example, these blue zones around the world, like the world's longest lifespans, the Okinawa Islands, et cetera, and imagining if those people, instead of focusing on how they can, live with the land and become their healthiest selves, which in turn became an inspiration for everyone else. Imagine if they were like, we can't focus on ourselves until every single person in the world is healthy. Well, not only would they not have been able to be that example for others, but we wouldn't know what's possible. So sometimes you focusing on yourself actually can create ripple effects throughout the world in the biggest way, even though you don't firsthand experience it at that moment.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And also connected to wanting to be of benefit and use and be helpful. And so like the inner transformational work of the mind, heart, body, and spirit to be of service and helpful to the larger web. I feel like that is also sometimes forgotten, that relationship and that interdependence that we have. I think sometimes in this modern day, it's easy to get caught up in the self and overly, even to the point of overdoing self-work, just almost as like an escape route, where remembering too that we're part of something larger and we're here to be of service. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's also an important part to doing the self-work, is recognizing our role in our service. Mm-hmm. And why we do this is so that we can actually show up in a good way and contribute and be helpful.
Yes. And I think that it's that perfect balance. And we all have our own experiences of, maybe not thinking about the whole and only doing the self-care so you can have more clear skin and you can be, talk to your spirit guides more. And then the people who have like no boundaries, complete empaths, taking on the pain of the world. And it's like finding that perfect balance between the two. And I think we're really stepping into that right now. And right now, what I love that's emerging is looking at things from this higher perspective. And I know you're someone who teaches oracle arts, and a lot of people are identifying themselves as an oracle. So what does that really mean to be an oracle?
That's a great question too. One of the things I like to spend time contemplating, sharing about is this idea of oracular consciousness. What does that actually mean? So far, what I feel, and it's a growing, living consciousness too. So it grows. I feel like every day I'm learning more things about it. But what I'm learning about it right now is it's this eternal presence where we're tuned into time moving in all directions, where a prayer that we have here in this moment is a prayer that can be supportive for the beauty we want to see in the world in the future, a prayer that's important for our present moment, and a prayer that helps tend to any ancestral dynamics that that have been inherited or that we've been carrying. And how the timeless state is connected to this awareness of time moving in a circle or backwards, forwards, upward, downwards, diagonal. It's this oracular state of consciousness where everything is simultaneously happening. And maintain that eternal state of presence in the mystery of it, and being really aware in the mystery of it is part of that ability, opens up that ability to be vessels for information and wisdom, whether it's the wisdom in the water in our body, because water is a carrier of the wisdom of the ages. Water never leaves. We come from water, we are made of water, we return to water. This earth is primarily made of water. I've been taught that water carries the wisdom of the ages, and all this information is stored in the water. And so when I think about oracular consciousness, when I'm in that eternal present state where time is moving in all directions, and I'm tuning in, staying attuned and tuning in, this wellspring of information, instruction sometimes, and wisdom emerges. And it's definitely intuitive based also, but it's also science. It's like a sacred science and as intuition. It's combined. And this wellspring of information, wisdom, and understanding can emerge from this eternal state. And I believe that everybody has access to oracular consciousness. I feel like it's actually a common thing. Historically, oracles were a very important part of the care of communities and the care of societies and the care of empires. And we're learning what it means to be connected to this. I like to think of it, the wisdom in the water, or these 32 intelligences that reside in the internal body system. These, heart, mind, body, and spirit. We have lots of different types of intelligences. And part of this time, I feel, is like waking up to this stored wisdom to be, so we can put that in service and can call upon new innovative technologies and a deeper listening that's not just with the ears. And part of that deeper listening too, I find, is connected to our relation with the ancestral homelands of where we reside, the stories of the places where we reside, the stories of our bloodlines, where we come from, our benevolent ancestors are. Because there's like a mystical, oracular tradition, I believe, in probably all of them, whether they use the term oracle or not. And learning these stories and learning where we come from, even all the way back to ancient Egypt, going as far back as we can, I find is really helpful in waking up, at least for me, the intelligences inside myself to help me then see how to be of service and how to innovate and really open up doors of perception to see deeper into what's going on in a new way, so that I can actually contribute something that ideally is very helpful for 7 generations into the future and more.
So beautifully said. And I think there is a, collective awakening and remembrance of, oh, this is our ancestors' land, or the ancestors of another, group of people, and honoring that. And then also going into our ancestry and working through whatever may have happened, but also there's a lot of ancestral guilt, and seeing that no matter what, I think for the most part, they were trying to do the best that they could with the limited knowledge that they had, and making peace with what happened rather than being like, I hate my ancestors, which is how a lot of people feel right now. So how can we, if we feel very disconnected from our own ancestral lineage, reconnect?
There's a lot of ways to do that. Obviously, some people are concerned about sharing their DNA with things like Ancestry.com and 23andMe and things like that. And then, of course, asking our family. There's so much healing when we ask our family about our bloodlines and our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers and great-grandfathers and all the way back. And also, oftentimes when I'll literally just talk to my benevolent ancestors inside me through my bloodlines or looking at the stars and ask them for guidance. And it's like, for me, it's like clockwork. They show up. They show up through lots of different ways. Like maybe I run into somebody who's from Guam and they share a story. Or maybe I start to look up the Pacific Islands and learn all of these. Somehow the web read my, intuitive nature, asking my ancestors for guidance. Like it's connected like that. And then all of a sudden these doorways of understanding open up. And sometimes it's purely just asking for the connection. It can be that simple. And then that prayer, because it's a prayer setting in motion by asking and building that relationship. Because a lot of times the way I've been taught is our benevolent ancestors, guides and allies, they're here to assist. But what I was told is they can't necessarily assist unless we ask them. I mean, there is divine intervention moments for sure. But for the most part, they can help when we ask them. And that's part of their duty to support this time of turning. Like, all systems, we're all hands on board, human and non-human, you know what I mean, at this time. And that they want to connect and help and support this time of turning. And the way that they can is if we talk to them. It's kind of like that thing where when you water the plant, it grows. When you talk to the plant, it even blossoms even more. But when you don't, it dies. And that same kind of concept I feel like relates to our ancestors is when we talk to them, the relation grows. When we commune with them, we research, want to know more and keep going, because so many of us are made of so many different bloodlines too. It's like we'll start with our moms and dads, and then we'll go and go and go. And then all of a sudden we look into this huge web of thousands of ancestors from lots of different traditions. And then it brings us back to how connected we all are, for sure. And also looking at the few lines to start with also help us see the diversity in this unified field that we're all made of too, and the nuances and the details and the different kinds of offerings that we can bring to the group, bring to the table. So I would say the first three suggestions would be, if you're comfortable with Ancestry.com or 23andMe and those kinds of ways, looking into those, of course, asking your family, because right there, so much healing can come up just by asking that. Every time I've asked an aunt or an uncle or a relation for details of stories, it's created healing in the family. It's wild. It's like clockwork. And then it strengthens my bloodlines and my relationships in different ways. So that, and then another one is just, if you like altars, put something up there that represents your ancestry and build that relation, start to talk to them. Or talk to them inside yourself in meditation or looking at the stars. I love to talk to my ancestors looking at the stars. So those are some offerings.
I love that. It reminds me of the scene in The Lion King when his father dies and he looks up at the stars and he sees his father talk back to him in the stars and the reflection. And, it's so simplistic, but it really is. It's like they're everywhere. And I think we're so used to, everything is so gross in our society that it's like, if it's not like a physical human speaking a language that we understand, we don't take it as communication, and it's opening yourself up to the subtleties. One thing that I have been toying around with is like doing this like dopamine detox where you don't use your phone, you don't, reach for stimulation all the time, so you can become more sensitive to these subtleties. And then you can hear the stars talking to you, or the trees or the flowers or whatever else. But if we're constantly consumed by videos and video games or whatever it is, it's very, very hard to actually be able to hear it.
So true.
Yeah.
So, probably that's why this is happening right now. This, what Charles Eisenstein says, the coronation, is to get us to stop. We wouldn't otherwise,
I know this episode is good, but so is this sponsor. It's officially fall, Vata season, and you know what that means. Pumpkin spice everything. So if you're a High Self podcast listener, you probably love pumpkin spice lattes, but you probably don't love the sugar, the dairy, etc. that goes into them. Well, I have something just for you. So I've been talking about Organifi products for a really long time, but this season they have their special pumpkin spice gold recipe, which is insane. It has turmeric, ginger, reishi mushroom, lemon balm, turkey tail mushroom, allspice. It literally tastes like a pumpkin spice latte without the sugar plus all of the superfoods. So you can find this in all of their other incredible products, including their gold chocolate, their green, their red juice, so many wonderful things to keep your immune system really healthy, strong, and vibrant, and also help you with just the stress levels that we're experiencing right now over on their website at Organifi.com using coupon code Sahara for your 20% discount. That's Organifi, ORGANIFI.com with coupon code Sahara, and you can find that link in the show notes. So right now, a lot of people are also having collective remembrances of past lives and past life lineages. I know you yourself are very connected to your Egyptian past life lineages and have traveled there and, teach so much about this. And something that I've heard someone say, and I'd love your opinion, is that every human has had a past life in Egypt, like Kemetic past life, because it was such a, huge civilization that has made humankind what it is today. So for those of us who are, resonating with ancient Egypt or feeling that, how can we deeperly connect with it?
Well, one thing I just want to share about everyone having a past life in Egypt, I love to think about this. No one ever shared this with me. I just kind of one day was sitting and this idea came up. I like to think of cauldrons as these. I think of like a cosmic cauldron in the stars or in the celestial realms. And when a body dies, when the soul takes the boat back to its celestial home, I like to imagine that it goes into this cauldron. And so this cauldron is like this big soup of all of these different souls mixing. And then it's time for a new divine spark of a soul to come forward. The Big Dipper comes in and stirs up the cosmic soup and takes a scoop of it and then throws it into, and then during the divine spark takes the journey on the boat coming in, and aligns with its mom and dad and its astrological timeline of its destiny or its purpose or mission, what it's here to do, comes into a body. And so the way that I think of that in relationship to past lives is probably why we have so many past life memories, because we're mixed like that. Souls are mixed like that. And in that way, we could have millions of them. Who knows? But there is something to note that every person I've met in some way, shape, or form either has been completely mystified and in awe of the Great Pyramid, the mystery of Egypt, or has had memories of being there. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of different stories around that. Are we talking pre-flood or post-flood? Graham Hancock is a great one to discussing this timeline. I like to explore ancient civilizations quite a bit. That's a great study for me personally. And then also, it's worth noting that, as far as I know, that there isn't another pyramid that is the same geometric analogy as the Great Pyramid. Like the mathematics of the Great Pyramid in relation to any of the other pyramids, even in Egypt, there isn't another one like that. And they discovered that, recent is, what does recent mean actually if we're talking about post-flood or pre-flood, but because really post-flood, we're pretty young as a species when we think about it, at least in what some of the old Sumerian and some of the old texts and artifacts say. But it's interesting to note that there isn't so far hasn't been another pyramid uncovered that has the same mathematic geometries as the Great Pyramid, and it being eight-sided. It's eight-sided, which is also very interesting. And it's very likely that it was made by our species. I mean, it's pretty much proven that we didn't make it to the way that we think about it. And to this day, as far as I know, there hasn't been another country that's been able to replicate the Great Pyramid in its details and its math. So there's something to that. And the fact that that's a living example of a sacred site that exists and that we get to live here in this planet while that technology is there, I feel like is an indicator of something way older where we come from. Way, way, way older than where we come from. And the mere fact of the mystery of the Great Pyramid in and of itself and the Sphinx. And then when you start to go into the stories of ancient Egypt and the different schools of thought and the science, the sacred sciences of ancient Egypt, the mystical, philosophical technologies, and really the science, how creation comes from the most subtle to the most dense, like you said, gross, subtle to dense, subtle to gross, and then from the very primordial subtle qualities to the physical world. The science and technology of that's written in these texts that has been interpreted by many different people is just so profound. And by nature, in studying and exploring these ways, even if you just spent your whole life getting to know the Great Pyramid, it opens doorways of memory, the reality of we're way older than we think that we are, and where we come from is far older than what the history books are telling us. And I feel like they open up doorways of our intelligences and our perception that is actually very helpful and very useful for this time of transition. It's very helpful because when we actually look into the past and look and get to know actually, that we're far older than we think and far more connected to an intelligence than we are currently working within, that kind of mystery and awe and wonder is so necessary to help us create the beauty we want to see in the world for generations into the future. So important. And I'm an eternal student of ancient Egypt, I can definitely I'll suggest right now some great places to start. I mean, I'm always studying lots of different schools of thought in the Kemetic traditions, Kemetian traditions. There's a lot of different schools of thought. Currently, as a starting point, I love Normandy Ellis. She's been such a great guide. She actually did a translation of Awakening Osiris, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, Coming Forth by Day. She studied the hieroglyphics and did her own translation. It's an incredible text. Highly recommend her. And Imagining the World into Existence, Normandy Ellis. And Nikki Scully. Nikki Scully is one of my first teachers in these ways. She's actually a guide for me that helped me go to Egypt in the first place. And then I also really love Rosemary Clark and her work, Sacred Traditions, Sacred Magic of Ancient Egypt. I love Moata Ashby. He has a lot of different books, Moata Ashby. And then the Medu Neter is a really, really great text too, for some sort of starting points. And then if somebody's really interested in a divination deck specifically, the Book of Doors is incredible by Anton Veggie and Alison Davidson. It's really, they did a lot of work looking at Ishwalar de Lubitz and Wallace Budge and creating this incredible divination deck of 64 Neteru, which are the divine principles, qualities of the celestial terrestrial realms. So the Neteru are, we personify them. Very common examples of like Sekhmet, or Hathor, Heter, Heteru, Isis, Aset, Osiris, Osir. And what I love about that divination book, Oracle deck, is it brings in some of the Kemetic names, because the Kemetic names I feel like are very important, because one Kemetic name is made up of a variety of different words that mean different things. So we start to get into getting to know the divine names, divine tones, and what they represent. Where like Isis and Hathor and Osiris, Horus, those are the Greek versions, the Greek terms. So I feel like it's very important to look at the Kemetic names also. So those are some suggestions on where to start. And then, of course, Graham Hancock. I'd highly recommend looking into his work if you haven't.
Yes, so much to say to all of that. Yeah, it was fascinating for me because when I was studying, I was like, oh, wow, like Isis, Hathor, they aren't even their original names. And as we know, a word carries so much vibration, and the hieroglyphics in themselves carried so much like symbology, and receiving those codes communicated with you so much deeper than just like typical words and vocabulary could. So I think there's so much power of reclaiming that and reclaiming indigenous words. And something that I noticed was when I was trying to learn the different stories of per se, Isis, etc., I felt like there must have been more there. I felt like maybe some of the stories had been lost or changed. Like, for example, Isis's story of, maybe you could share a little bit about Osiris and getting his penis again to create the child. But I felt like there must have been more there. I would love to know if you've been able to see if there are other stories of the goddesses that may have been lost with, patriarchy kind of sweeping over.
Something I'd love to do my best to consider is the power of mythology in relationship to a personal story that becomes a myth, that becomes a legend, that becomes, quote, history. And also in the older mythologies, how they could be describing the process of creation in different forms and the science of physics. One of the things that took me a long time to sort of follow this road and get to this pathway, but I've been learning, for years now, about looking at the Egyptian family members and their roles and what they tend to is aspects of the process of creation and destruction and life that feeds death, that feeds life again, the life, death, and rebirth cycle. And so some of these, and this is why I think it's important to read lots of different versions of stories too, and think about them or tune into them in relationship to creation and the interdimensional realms. One of the things I love about, the journey of the duat, or when the body dies and the soul goes into the duat, which is the netherworld, to meet Osiris. That whole journey of the soul is when the soul takes a journey through the 12 gates to get to meet Osiris, and weigh their heart with the feather of Ma'at. Ma'at meaning cosmic law and cosmic truth. Weigh their heart against the feather of Ma'at, and with the older texts are the 42 negative confessions, or the 42 ideals. That's like a modern version. And if the heart was lighter than the feather, then they would continue on to the celestial realms. That, if the heart wasn't, then they would either get eaten and serve another life, or enter into this other realm that they had to work through some aspects of self that were necessary. What I love about that story is that when the soul is going on that journey that we also do in this life, that willingness to commit to go through the alchemical transformational process, Kemetic, where alchemy comes from, is Egypt, because Kem, K-H-E-M, is Egypt. The willingness to go through that alchemical process is also food and nourishment that feeds the soil in the middle world and provides nutrition and nutrient value to the soil to feed all creation here. And then simultaneously is connected to the journey that the soul is taking the celestial realms. So Osiris is, well known to be in relationship to the netherworld or the afterlife, but is also very much connected to this world in terms of actual soil and farming and agriculture. And so it's really amazing to see how many people are gardening right now, It's like everything that's happened has inspired everyone to get back to the garden. And, when you put your hands in the soil and the actual health, especially if it's healthy soil, the joy and inspiration it brings in the transformational process you see when you plant a seed, and then the seed growing through the dark soil and breaking through into the light, and then growing and growing into full blossom. And then when it comes into full blossom, it offers itself back to the soil as compost. It dies. It offers its death back to the soil to mix with the soil to then support another life moving forward. The journey of the seed to fruit, to flower, to death is the same journey that we go through, and that's reflected in the Egyptian cosmologies, the Egyptian stories. And that same thing's reflected in the process of creation. Tehuti, Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus, thrice greatest born. One of the stories is that Tehuti came down with Ma'at. She represents cosmic law, cosmic truth. She has the feather of Ma'at, was an ostrich feather. They came down together from the primordial waters of Nu, where they say the androgynous serpent resides. And they came down together on a ship. And Tehuti was there to support Thoth, to support Ma'at, cosmic law and cosmic truth. And Tehuti often represents the sacred sciences, the divine word, Heka, magic, the the word, the tone, the sound, the timing which we say something, how the rippling effect that it makes, and also related to technology, and was coming down to help with the manifestation technologies in reverence to cosmic law and cosmic truth. And Tehuti is well known for Thoth, the Emerald Tablet. So if anyone hasn't checked out the Emerald Tablet, I highly recommend looking at the Emerald Tablet because it's an ancient code. It's a really powerful ancient code around the process of creation and life, death, and rebirth. And there's a lot of different translations of the Emerald Tablet. In fact, it's amazing to read different translations because there's so much there. I say Thoth Tehuti was an Atlantean. And there's some stories were the Egyptians Atlanteans or were they Lemurians? There's the Shem-Suhur, there's the Pout. They say that there's both. You have a lot of stories that way. Even the Library of Alexandria, some stories is that the original library was in the Temple of Horus in Edfu. And that a lot of the priests and priestesses would go there to train in the Temple of Edfu, is the Temple of Heru, Horus, to understand the deeper mysteries that were brought forward from Tehuti Thoth in relation to cosmic law and cosmic truth. And so a modern day version of that, or not modern, but a place to start to explore that's very old, is the Emerald Tablet. And highly recommend looking into that. And then another really amazing, important text, I believe, is called the Kabbalion, Aybalion. It's the 7 Hermetic principles from Tehuti, from Thoth. Thoth is a very important divinity, Netaru, in the family. And so I would also look into that. Now, why I bring all these things up in relationship to the stories is, stories, it's like a telephone game, It's like the telephone game. Like we hear one story, read one story, and then we interpret it and translate it or share what we remember. And oftentimes what we remember is perhaps a portion of the bigger picture. And so part of the journey of remembrance is, in my opinion, to go back and look deeper into these older stories to see what they're actually trying to share. And then also to share with others. I feel like it's really important to have a study group, like a group that maybe a whole 2 or 3 of you want to get to know the story of Oser and Aset, Isis and Osiris, and reading different threads and then bringing those mythology, those stories together and see what you come up with. Or 3 people want to read about the Kabbalion, creating a group conversation around what we're learning and what we're studying to then contemplate and see how that applies to our lives, I feel like is also very, very important. Because maybe one part that somebody heard about the story of Aset and Isis and Osiris that really stuck to them, that was really important for their life transformation, was really different from the other one and really different from the other one, which is why maybe some pieces get lost or reinterpreted in different ways. But if you have multiple people together sharing about what they're learning, then you get to see more parts of the whole, which is a big part of what the story is about. All the dismembered parts of Osiris, 14 pieces, bringing all those parts back together and reuniting them on behalf of the transformation that's needed at this time. So we can apply that process to bringing people together around this story to bring all of the threads and reweave them in a way that actually creates something beautiful and helpful.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing some of the resources that people can dive deeper into learning the stories and how different ones will, resonate with different people at different stages of their lives. And I know that one really common interest that people have right now is the Mary Magdalene and Isis connection. So can you share a little bit more about this?
So there is a big correlation with Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, and Aset. One of the places I communed in and studied in and was the Fellowship of Isis, which is a lineage that people can look up to if they want to really get into that lineage. And one of the stories is that Mary Magdalene, daughter, were trained with Mother Mary in these priestess lineages that comes from the lineage of Aset and Isis, that those mystery teachings and trainings are in that lineage. There's this one story, it's a story. I like to say story because sometimes, parts of the story are accurate, sometimes they're not. So I think it's really important to speak in terms of story versus like, this is definitely truth. Because as we know right now, so much is changing, like so much is being uncovered. So whatever we considered to be truth at one point is changing and evolving. So this is why I think it's important to think of things in terms of stories, and also to help us create the new stories that are very helpful too at this time. But one of those stories is that in the time of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, when Akhenaten changed everything that was happening in Egypt, and really it was like, you don't need to go through all of the high priesthood to connect to the god, to the Aten. You can go directly to the source and connect to the Aten, and that of course set the high priesthood. So the story is that they took them down into Lamarna, and one of the stories is that one of the daughters that going into exile went to the Isle of Skye and went to Scotland, Ireland, and England in that region. And one of the stories that she had to either shift her name or she was given another name that was Skota. And she brought the ancient teachings and mystery traditions over there. And so there's an interesting relationship, when we look into the Druidic and some of the more pagan practices in that region, there's a lot of shared similarities with different names and in slightly different ways with ancient Egypt. And some stories where it's connected to how that was brought about, or other stories is that they actually studied with Egyptian temples and studied Egyptian ways and were carrying forward the lineages and the traditions and the ritual technologies of Egypt, ancient Egypt, perhaps in the Lemurian or the Atlantean lineages. I'd love to speak in relation to Kabbalah in the Hermetic Kabbalistic traditions, because I find it's a very helpful blueprint and a practice to see corresponding relationships. So one of the stories in terms of the process of creation is that there's this sphere, Sahara, called Bina, and she's the Holy Mother and divine feminine principle and aspect. And she also represents the womb, represents the yoni, represents form. And she also is the great sea, and she's understanding. And one of her names is Mara. And Mara, meaning the great sea, or Stella Maris, is related to the sea of stars. And that one of the stories is that Mara, the Marys and the Mary Magdalenes, is connected to the creation story and principle of the Holy Mother, which is Bina, and how all of creation emerges from the womb of Bina. And that's an entire teaching in and of itself that's a very hermetic process. And one of the ancient teachings that I focus on and follow, because it really shows a lot of these correlations of the Marys, the Magdalenes, Aset, and Bina, is the Hermetic Kabbalistic teachings, because it talks about the process of creation and how we can attune to these frequencies and these spheres. Like one of the stories that I love in the Hermetic Kabbalistic tradition, in the Robert Wang book, is about how there's this idea that the church came from Mother Mary, and that Mother Mary wasn't just the statue that we prayed to for that, remembrance of the Holy Mother and that benevolence and the honoring of the holy waters from which we came from, and the holy waters that we were made of, and the holy waters that we return to. But also, she was the church itself. So when you entered the doors of the church, you're entering her body. She's the holy water that we bless ourselves with. She's the hymns and the songs and the tones and the prayers and the feeling and the frankincense and the myrrh. She represents the rites and the technologies in relation to the sacred, and how we tend to the sacred and how we care for the spirit. And that those teachings, those temple rites, obviously they got adopted, colonized, taken over, clearly, come from these ancient temple rites of Kem, the land of Kem, ancient Egypt. So there's a lot there. We could probably spend an hour just on that.
There's so much there. And a book that a lot of people are reading right now is the Magdalene manuscripts. And in that, they speak into sex magic. I would love to hear your take on this.
I haven't read that book in a decade, so I'm sure there's so much more to that book than I remember right now. But the mystery of sex is the mystery of creation. Mm-hmm. It's all sex. Now, in what ways? Like I feel like everything is making love all the time. Look at nature, And one of the things my friend Louis Schwartzberg, amazing filmmaker, definitely look up Louis Schwartzberg. He just worked on this film with Paul Stamets called Fantastic Fungi, incredible. And he says that beauty is the survival tool for nature. I was like, what? Like, wow, And so I asked him, I was like, what do you mean by that? And he was talking about the role of beauty and courting in the natural world. And this really the sexual dynamic of creation and how the role of beauty, the role of courting, and what that makes, and the integrity of that, and the mutual courting that occurs. I believe sex magic is one of the highest forms of ritual, especially when we have a level of intent, awareness, care, purpose, and liberation involved. It's obviously one of the most used technologies for control and manipulation, which in and of itself shows the power of it. And it's so subtle and so detailed on what what our real intent is and what we're trying to do with the power of that magic, But one of the things that Lan Mythology says, which I really love, and this is a different approach on the term magic, is we don't do magic. We become magicians so that all acts become magical acts. So in that form, sex magic is an act of everything being a magical act. So everything that's happening in there is alchemical. Everything that's happening in that relationship and that time we spend together is alchemical. That is food and nourishment to nourish our interiors temple, the inside, that's outside, as with, so without, so that we can tend to creation in a good way. And really the subtle and the care that we take with it in that liberating dynamic so that we're aware of the energy that we're wielding. I mean, I could talk about this one for a long time also. These are big topics, every single one of them.
Yes. And I think it's so beautiful that people are really realizing the potency of sex and that it is this, it is an energy transfer, and also it can be used in a powerful way. And I know that there are different schools of thoughts of the practice of sex magic, is this something that you need to work your way up to have a certain level of, meditative focus to be able to cultivate that energy towards, whatever it is that you want. But then also, as you say, we're already magicians that, it could just be setting a tiny intention before you have sex, or, bringing energy to your heart, or, the things that you're already doing, just adding a little bit more ritual to that. So for someone who does want to maybe ritualize their sexual life a little bit more, what do you suggest?
Well, first thing I just want to, before I speak to that, and when you said we're all magicians, I want to be clear that it's a study to really learn how to work with creation in a good way. And what part of that study is the healing and the transformation and the deprogramming of the programs that we've, in even the programming nature of the English language in this Western world that we've been raised in, that is by nature colonizing in and of itself. So there's a great study around being really careful about how we use our will and work with our energy in alignment, and always ideally in alignment with the will of the divine, so we're collaborating in a way. So the magical path is a lifelong study, and it's a commitment to the alchemical transformation. We're back at the beginning of the conversation. So I just want to speak to that because yes, we're magicians in the fact that we're all creators. And part of this work is understanding what we're creating, why we're doing it, how is this helpful, and what is it making? What kind of rippling effect are we making? And what we're allowing to influence us that then is by nature embedded and affecting what ripples we're making. So it's a lifelong journey and study. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And then in terms of, for those that want to get deeper into ritual and sex magic, I mean, I feel like at least, ritual is a popular term right now, and you can apply the term ritual to everything. But in a simple context, intention, having an intention, stating an intention, let it be simple too. Sometimes we get caught up in making these very complex intentions and stories that by nature almost are impossible to fulfill because they're so big, you know. One thing very simple, I mean, we know it when we light some candles, it sets us the tone, it sets the tone. When we like burn a really beautiful incense or resin, like frankincense or myrrh, it sets the tone. We put on music that's inspiring, that opens us up and opens our heart and our spirit. Put that music on, and something that's really nice too. You know, my partner, he's been studying in a Shukali Tantra tradition for a decade, and yogic tradition, and they have the asanas, the philosophy, and the rituals combined in the practice. And something that I find to set me in that state too, where I can liberate, open, and heal, is I do a little self-care first, like some stretching or yogic energy, like help me out. And then this is not all the time. This is just sometimes. Obviously, sometimes it's just that wild moment. You just go for it, you know. But if we want to set a ritual tone, you know, I'm focusing around that. Do a little self-care, anoint yourself, like dress yourself, love yourself, whatever, you know, care for you, you know, beautiful, do something that feels really good to you. And then light the candle, play the music that feels really good to you, light some incense, frankincense, and myrrh to open up that state. And then something too is the power and the beauty and the intimacy and the intimate cultivation through caressing. Caressing is so nice. Or like loving, you're dressing your lover with oil and like taking that time so all the senses start to wake up. More doorways, and that way more doorways of sensory memory palaces and perception open. And by nature, at least for me, transformation occurs in that experience. And more like, you know, because part of it is a journey of bliss, cultivating bliss. And so it's so nice to take time for it. Venus is the day of Friday. My partner and I, which is today, we have our Venus date every Friday. And we know from 5 p.m. on is our Venus date to celebrate our love, care for our love, and however we choose to do it. And it's part of it is getting into the rhythm of that love and care in relationship too. And that love and care in your central practice, whether it's just for you or it's with somebody. Because also you will create this ritual just for yourself and open up your sensory abilities just for self. Because there's magic in that too. So those are some ideas. We go on forever on this one too. I love this topic.
Yes, so beautiful. And a question that I commonly get that I'd love to ask you is, what if your partner is not into, you know, spirituality? They don't want to, you know, do breath work with you, et cetera. Would it still be possible for you to hold that, you know, intention, or would you suggest finding a different partner?
Well, I definitely had that with, I've had that in a previous partnership where he wasn't necessarily so into the practices that were important to me. And I still did them. And I didn't necessarily need to speak them out loud to him or force him to do it. You know, I could just do it on the inside, because at the end of the day, this is an internal journey anyways, this internal journey of awakening and the state of bliss. It's really awesome when your partner is on the same page, obviously. But you know, I was able to do a lot of my internal transformational opening work, just setting that intention for me and what makes me feel really good, and not necessarily needing to force him to do it. We aren't together anymore, but it doesn't mean I don't value all of the sexual practices that we did do. I was perhaps working in a different expression or dimension of it, but we were still able to come together. Definitely. My journey now is far more deep and profound because we're on the same page, or you know, even if we're not on the exact same page, he has wisdom to share and I have wisdom to share, and then we can help each other that way. But sometimes, you know I have a lot of friends actually that have partners that aren't so into the spiritual languaging or the breathwork practice. But it doesn't mean that like one of my dear sisters, her husband's not into this stuff, whatever that means, you know? And I was like, what do you mean by this stuff? And she's like, well, the way that he connects to the spirit is super different. He never uses the term spirit, and this is how he does it. I was like, awesome. Like, he wants to go work in the shop for a while and work it out. And then that somehow roused him up. while you're in the room doing your deep study of practice and Taoism and like all the different ways that you like to get to know your sexual practice. And he can come in with his wildness, and you can come in with your practice, and you don't even necessarily need to tell each other all the time. You can meet interdimensionally too. I believe that's very, it's at a different level for me now, but that's how I did in the past.
Definitely. And I think especially with the masculine, they often, relate to spirituality in such a different way. They don't want to do like a full moon goddess circle and like make yoni oils. Like that's not really fun for them. But I think for us, when we learn these new practices, I heard this on a podcast and I want to try it. Oh my God, you don't want to try it with me. And then, it creates a little bit of a discord in the relationship. So maybe it's working in the shop for him. That's his spiritual practice, or making music or whatever else. And also, I do think by holding that frequency too, you just naturally change them, like without even telling them. Soon they become curious, and often it will be through a different path and a different lineage. Like you shared, your partner is more on a yogic path, and sometimes it could just be a different languaging, a different culture, but it's really honoring the same thing, which is awareness.
Absolutely. And something I do find too is whether we're in two different lineages or belief structures, and how we connect to the spirit, to the sacred, having consistency of a date, like a time for courtship, like a time for like caring for, everyone loves the word love. It could just be that simple. A time to commune in love and creating time for it. So connection can occur on multiple levels. Like not just 1 hour, 2 hours,
Yes. And I think that beautiful practice that the goddesses would do of just adornship, of letting yourself be in these beautiful oils and maybe put the jewelry on and like let yourself feel super beautiful. And in that too, there will be a natural spark of chemistry that is created, but that's not the purpose of it either.
And, the adornment is, in a lot of the old temple rites, and now what we do in our temple rites, we adorn ourselves to adorn our own divinity in relationship to divinity. The ritual adornment is such a powerful healing process in and of itself, to like that kind of self-love and self-care that then right there brings that juice into the relationship.
It is such a potent one, especially for the feminine. I remember years ago when I went to Bali and I went with like, I don't know, just like my yoga outfits, right? Just like the yoga shorts or whatever. And then noticing like the women there who would wear these beautiful long skirts and like the fringes and the bangles and all of these things. And I would love how they would carry themselves, even if it was like we were in the same belly dance class, and naturally it just, created this shift in me that I traded out my shorts for like long flowy skirts. And, I feel like I go through different phases, especially with this quarantine. In the beginning, I was like pajamas all day. And now I'm just like getting dressed up for myself at home, and it feels so good.
Yes.
Yeah. So it is the time, ladies. Bring out that beautiful outfit that just makes you feel like a goddess and put it on for yourself and the divine. That's all that's needed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And garden at the same time.
At the same time.
That's the other thing. Like at one point I remember this program where I felt like I had to garden with certain clothes on. I was like, I'm going to garden in my dress and like just feel the beauty of gardening with this dress. And like, well, I don't want to get it dirty. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like I'm putting my love and care into this garden.
Yes, that's one of my favorite things. In India, you see, these beautiful women in these colorful saris, and they're like in the rice fields or like literally doing construction work, still rocking those saris. And it's so inspiring because I think we have this idea of like, I can only get dressed up if I have somewhere to go that's outside of the house so other people can witness me. And like just noticing that relation of like, I can only basically look good for others. And like, why can't that just be your daily practice? And then your relationship with fabric, with jewelry actually changes too. And you become less like, oh, this feels really foreign to me, and more like, this feels like me in my full power.
Absolutely. And then we get comfortable in our skin. Like sometimes I found that, at different times in my life when I like adorn myself for me, it helps me get more comfortable. in my radiant self, because sometimes it's tricky to do that.
100%. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing all of this incredible wisdom from alchemy to the Kemetic lineage and everything in between. And where can listeners connect with you and learn from you even further?
Well, I still say thank you, Sahara. It's really good to meet you. I really appreciate it. And this podcast, everything you're doing, your heart is beaming. It's just amazing to contribute and learn with you. So thank you. My Instagram right now is the best place, Isis_Indriya, because our website, Academy of Oracle Arts, we're rebuilding right now. That will be up soon, Academy of Oracle Arts. And then also to Living Village Culture is a network where we do all of our outreach projects, and that will soon be in relationship to Academy of Oracle Arts. And right now we're in the process of seeing if we can do our next Egypt trip in January and February. So that will also be in the Academy of Oracle Arts website. So right now, those are the things. Right away, immediately, my Instagram is probably the easiest because with all the things evolving.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. We are so grateful.
Likewise. Good. And every single person that listens to this, thank you too for all of your contributions, everything you bring to this time, and all hands on deck. We're all needed. We all have a role. We're all important. And the more we come together and the more we share what we have to offer, we actually make the beauty that's helpful and beneficial and really useful for all the generations to come. So thank you, Sahara.
Aho.
Wow. How incredible was that conversation? She has so much knowledge and takes us down so many different rabbit holes for us to explore. And really what we can all take away from this is that there's so much nuance and so many layers that it's not this one size fits all. The deeper you go into it, the more you realize that we don't know. And that's the mystery of it all, that there is no right or wrong. We're never going to get to the bottom of it. We're never going to become the complete master that has nothing else to learn. It is an ongoing process. So let yourself surrender to the mystery, surrender to the not knowing, because that's really what the teaching is. To be in the unknown and let yourself be okay with that. So we have a full Goddess Isis circle for you available in Rose Gold Goddesses. So in this circle, I actually dive us into the mysteries of Isis, into the process of alchemy and the different stages of alchemy, into her story, rituals for her, meditation, journal prompts, and how to really evoke her wisdom and her magic. She really is that goddess that represents alchemy and magic and transformation, how to evoke that into your life. So if you're curious to learn more about that, head over to rosegoldgoddesses.com. You can find the Goddess Isis Circle right in there. We also have month-to-month memberships back on, so you can join for a month, check it out, see how you like it, and then maybe transition to an annual membership for your over 2 months free that you get when you join on annual. So I'm super excited to meet you new beautiful members who want to dive into all of these beautiful ancient rabbit holes with us. You definitely are in the right community in Rose Gold Goddesses for this type of conversation. If you loved this episode, I would love to send you a free gift, which is the first half of my unreleased book, Eat Right for Your Mind Body Type. This is a different book than Eat Feel Fresh, my first book ever, which is not released anywhere, and I am gifting it exclusively to those who leave a review of my podcast in the iTunes store. So all you got to do is head over to iTunes, where you may be listening to this podcast, and leave a review. Take a screenshot that you've left it and email it over to me at Sahara@eatfeelfresh.com. Again, that's Sahara, Sahara, at eatfeelfresh.com. And I will send you back the first half of my unreleased book, Eat Right for Your Mind Body Type, which goes all into Ayurveda, doshas, plant-based nutrition, body types, all of the things in a really fun and engaging way. So this is my gift to you for free for supporting the podcast. Every single review I personally read. It really helps the podcast be listened to by more people so we can raise the vibration of the planet together. And I am so grateful to have you on this journey. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode. Namaste.